When the Queens Boulevard line goes down, strap hangers are left scrambling. Could a more connected system save the day? Hey there, transit enthusiasts. Welcome back to my channel, where I explore innovative, budget-friendly ways to expand New Yorkers' access to public transit. In this special 4-part series, we're tackling one of the biggest vulnerabilities in New York City's subway system, the lack of redundancy and service continuity in Queens. Across this series, we'll explore how better connectivity and alternative routes can protect Queens commuters from being stranded due to service disruptions on critical lines. In my opinion, 3 key components contribute to making a rail transit system highly effective and resilient when faced with disruptions. Let's break each one down. We'll use Manhattan for our examples, as most people are familiar with train routes there. The first component is what I call proximity-based redundancy. This refers to the ability for passengers to switch to nearby lines or routes when their primary subway line is disrupted. The proximity of alternate lines serving the same general area ensures minimal interruption to their commute. For instance, if you're at World Trade Center and need to get to Port Authority bus terminal, but the AC and E trains are out of service, you can walk a few blocks to the 1, 2, or 3 train. While it may add a few minutes to your trip, you'll still arrive at Port Authority without significant delay. That's proximity-based redundancy. The next component is what I call track switching service continuity. This happens when service on a specific set of tracks, such as the express tracks, is disrupted. Trains are temporarily switched to alternative tracks on the same line, like the local tracks, to maintain service while bypassing the affected area. If you've spent any time in New York, you've probably experienced this. For example, if you're on a W train at 14th Street, and the operator learns a train is broken down at 23rd Street, they might reroute you onto the express tracks to skip over the problem and continue to 34th Street. Passengers planning to get off at 23rd and 28th will need to backtrack a bit, but for everyone else, service continues with minimal disruption. That's track switching service continuity. The final component is line switching service continuity. This comes into play during major service disruptions like a power failure, track fire, or accident. In these situations, affected trains are rerouted onto a different line, bypassing multiple stations in the problem area while still providing service to passengers at stations before and after the disruption. For example, imagine a major track fire at 23rd Street on the 8th Avenue line that shuts down all tracks. In this case, E trains coming from Queens might be rerouted down the 6th Avenue line to West 4th Street, completely avoiding the problem area. Passengers at 5th and 53rd and all points east still have normal service, as do those south of West 4th Street. It's only the customers directly in the vicinity of the problem who are affected. This ability to switch from one line to another to minimize commuter disruption is what I call line switching service continuity. When a transit line has 1 or 2 of these components, it can operate fairly smoothly most of the time. But to achieve true resilience, a line needs all 3. Now let's shift gears and look at which trunk lines serve the most passengers. This chart gives a rough estimate of how many riders annually use each trunk segment of a subway line. While these numbers aren't exact, they're pretty close, and there probably aren't many surprises here. Lexington Avenue takes the top spot, which makes sense, given that it's the only line on the east side of Manhattan, though that demand may shift a bit once the 2nd Avenue subway is fully operational. The higher a trunk segment ranks on this list, the more critical it is for that line to have redundancy and service continuity in place. So let's zoom in on the 5 busiest lines. 3 of the 5 busiest lines, 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, and Broadway, have the core components for resiliency covered. But the Lexington Avenue line is a different story. There's no proximity-based redundancy for riders living on the eastern side of Manhattan. The MTA is addressing this with the 2nd Avenue subway, though progress has been painfully slow. That leaves the Queens Boulevard line. It's the only top 5 line located outside of Manhattan and the only one without line switching continuity. While there is partial proximity-based redundancy at its western end with the 7 train nearby, the Queens Boulevard line and the Flushing line diverge quickly, leaving many commuters without a backup plan. That's why I've chosen to focus my first series on building resiliency on a budget, starting with a plan for the Queens Boulevard line in part 1. So, how can we make the Queens Boulevard line more resilient? The answer lies in building in both service continuity and redundancy. Now let's dive into how we can achieve that while getting the most bang for our buck. 2 of the biggest costs in creating a new transit line are tunnel boring and paying for property seized through eminent domain. And let's be real, using eminent domain is not only expensive, but it's also bound to stir up opposition, potentially derailing any efforts before they even get started. So we're not even going to consider those options. So with tunnel boring and acquiring new property off the table, I started looking for defunct and underutilized rights of way near Queens Boulevard, and I stumbled upon something interesting. With the help of satellite photos and maps, special shout out to Vanch Nukenragen, apologies if I'm butchering that, I quickly noticed that the LIRR main line, which runs parallel to Queens Boulevard, has 2 unused track beds. Now that line is a little closer than I'd like, about half a mile apart, but it still presents an intriguing opportunity. What if we built out these 2 unused track beds and used them to provide additional subway service? After closely examining the area, I think it's doable. The unused track beds are positioned on opposite sides of the main line. The northernmost and southernmost track beds are currently vacant. I propose we shift the LIRR mainline tracks slightly to the north and use the 2 southernmost tracks for a new subway line. Placing the tracks on the south side of the line is really the best option, considering that the LIRR cuts through neighborhoods and often makes commuting more difficult for people living south of it. By utilizing tracks 5 and 6, we could bring subway service to the northern parts of Maspeth and Middle Village, as well as the southern sections of Elmhurst and Rego Park, areas that currently have limited or no access to the subway. We'd install island platforms accessible via pedestrian bridges that span across all 6 tracks. This design would make the new line accessible to everyone on both sides of the main line, but folks on the south side would have a slightly shorter and easier trek to reach the new stations. Track 6, the southernmost track bed, would need to bow out slightly around the stations to accommodate the platform. After the station, it would curve back in to ensure proper alignment with the existing rail bridges. Along this re-engineered section of the main line, I propose building at least 3 new stations, Maspeth, Grand Avenue, and Woodhaven Boulevard. After Woodhaven Boulevard, the tracks would split. Surface level tracks would continue along the abandoned LIRR Rockaway Beach branch. More on that shortly. Meanwhile, underground tracks would reconnect with the Queens Boulevard line via a tunnel under 66th Avenue, as shown by the pink line here. This would provide line switching service continuity for the E, F, M, and R trains, allowing them to run on this new line when needed, and bypass many stations west of 67th Avenue. The 67th Avenue station is relatively shallow at about 30 feet deep, which works in our favor for cost. Since we only need to transition trains from the surface to 30 feet underground with a tunnel that's less than a mile long, the MTA could likely build this at a lower cost using a combination of cut and cover and traditional excavation methods. Now that we've factored in eastern line switching continuity for Queens Boulevard, let's talk about the western end. The choice here is easy. Sunnyside Yard. The E, F, M, and R trains all run either directly to or right along this train yard, and the LIRR main line runs directly into it. By merging the subway lines back into their corresponding tracks at Sunnyside Yard, we'd achieve line switching continuity that covers service disruptions at all 10 stations between the 2 ends. With Queens Boulevard's needs addressed, where should we extend this new line next? The answer is just as clear. The abandoned Rockaway Beach branch of the LIRR. This abandoned branch connects directly to the main line that we're planning to build our new line on. Transit enthusiasts will recognize the branch, as there's been significant chatter over the past several years about reactivating it as an extension of the Queens Boulevard line. Despite the discussions, no solid plans have been made. One of the primary roadblocks is that some groups are pushing to convert the space into parkland instead. This debate has been framed as Queensway versus Queenslink. As you might expect, I'm firmly on the pro-transit side of this argument. So for my proposal, we're going to go ahead and build tracks on this abandoned right-of-way and connect them to our new line. Now, as a side note, I do think a connection to the Queens Boulevard line makes sense as well, but I'll dive deeper into that in part 3 of this series. My thoughts on that need their own video. This new set of tracks would feature 7 new stations. I'll dive into the details of each one later in the video when I zoom in on their locations and features. The southern end of this new line connects with the A train's Rockaway line, which is especially convenient because it opens up multiple new routes to JFK Airport for New Yorkers. This added potential really pushes the idea forward and makes mapping out the entire line straightforward. So here's my proposal. We're going to discontinue the Rockaway Park shuttle and convert it into a full subway line. Let's call it the H train, since the MTA has used that designation internally for Rockaway service for years. The H train will run from Rockaway Park to Hanover Square, which is planned to be built out in Phase 4 of the 2nd Avenue subway. Since this train will run along 2nd Avenue through Midtown, we'll style its bullet with the same turquoise color the MTA plans to use for the 2nd Avenue T train. While we're on the topic of bullet color, I just have to say, I think turquoise is a terrible choice for a subway bullet. It's too light, which makes the letter designation harder to see than it should be. The MTA has done this with other lines too, like the L and G trains, and it's especially problematic for people with vision-related disabilities. A darker teal would be a much better option, as the white lettering would stand out more clearly, but I digress. Here's the overall route map. The full line would include 29 stations spread over 22 miles. Of those, 10 stations would be completely new. All of the new stations would be built at exterior locations that the MTA already owns, which significantly drives down costs. We'll break down the pricing in more detail shortly. But for now, let's zoom in and take a closer look at each major section of the roadmap. H trains would embark on their journey from Rockaway Park, Beach, 116th Street. They'd cover all stations on the current Rockaway Park shuttle line. They'd continue on past Broad Channel, making stops at JFK and Aqueduct. There'd be no construction costs needed for this part of the line, given that it already exists. H trains would then continue on to the new Queenslink segment, stopping at 7 brand new stations. Since these are exterior stations built on existing right-of-way and based on figures I've seen for the IBX line, I estimate construction would cost about $250 million per station. That brings the total cost for these 7 stations to $1.75 billion. Then the H trains would continue on to what I'm labeling the continuity segment. This part of the route will feature 3 brand new exterior stations with a total cost of $750 million. Additionally, we'll build out the connection to the Queens Boulevard line here. This includes constructing a tunnel with bidirectional travel, connecting both directions of our new line and both directions of the Queens Boulevard line, using a mix of cut and cover where possible and mining excavation under buildings. This half-mile tunnel is projected to cost around $350 million to construct. There'd be virtually no cost to the tracks on into Sunnyside Yard, given that the infrastructure is already there. After passing through Sunnyside Yard, the H train will join the F line, sharing 2 stops and running through the 63rd Street tunnel. Once in Manhattan, the H will merge onto the 2nd Avenue T line, with its first stop on 2nd Avenue being 55th Street. The cost for the H joining the F in Sunnyside should be minimal. However, merging onto the T line will require some tunnel boring between 63rd and 60th Streets. Fortunately, a boring machine will already be in the area as part of the T line construction. If the tunnel is bored while the equipment is on site, we could significantly cut costs. Given the short distance of 1/10 of a mile and the existing machinery, we're budgeting $400 million for this segment. Once the full T line is built, heading south, it's slated to run alongside the Q until 63rd Street. My proposed H line would merge in at 55th Street to take advantage of the extra capacity opened up by the Q branching off. The H would serve all 9 subsequent stations following the same route as the new T train, with service terminating at Hanover Square. There's no additional cost for these stations as they're covered by the T line budget. So that's my proposed service pattern for a brand new H line. Building the H line as I've proposed would give New Yorkers a 22-mile long route with 29 stations, including 10 brand new stations. Passengers would enjoy easy transfers to 16 other subway lines, plus connections to Metro North, the LIRR, and the air train to JFK Airport. Queens passengers would have a 1-seat ride to Manhattan's East Side, while those living in East Manhattan would have a much easier time getting to the airport. There are so many benefits to building this line out, so what's the projected cost? Amazingly, the total cost for this H-line project comes in at just $3.25 billion. That may sound like a lot, but consider this. The MTA is paying $7 billion just to build 3 new stations on the Q train for the 2nd Avenue subway, Phase 2. If they can find the money to do that, surely they could fund a project with as many benefits as this new H train. So that wraps up Phase 1 of my plan to improve service continuity and redundancy in Queens. I've got plans for at least 3 more phases, all centered around enhancing subway service in Queens. It might take a little while for those videos to come out, depending on how busy life gets, so if you're interested in catching those, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Up next, I'll be sharing a map for each stop, listing out their connections, and even playing some mock announcements. If that's your thing, stay tuned. For everyone else, thanks for checking out the channel. Until next time.
This is Rockaway Park Beach, 116th Street.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the rear of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Beach 105th Street Seaside Station. This is Beach 105th Street, Seaside Station.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Beach 98th Street, Playland. This is Beach 98th Street, Playland Station.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Beach 90th Street, Holland. This is Beach 90th Street, Holland Station.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the rear of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Broad Channel. This is Broad Channel. Transfer is available to the A train.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Howard Beach, JFK Airport. This is Howard Beach, JFK Airport. Transfer is available to the A, G, and R trains. Connection is available to the air train to JFK Airport.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the rear of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Aqueduct. This is Aqueduct. Transfer is available to the A train.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Ozone Park. This is Ozone Park.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Woodhaven Junction. This is Woodhaven Junction. Transfer is available to the Z train.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Brooklyn Manor. This is Brooklyn Manor.
This is an accessible station. Elevators are at the front of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Forest Park. This is Forest Park.
This is an accessible station. A ramp is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Parkside. This is Parkside.
This is an accessible station. A ramp is available at the front of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Forest Hills. This is Forest Hills.
This is an accessible station. A ramp is available at the rear of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Rico Park Montauk. This is Rico Park Montauk. Transfer is available to the R train.
This is an accessible station. And ramp is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Woodhaven Boulevard. This is Woodhaven Boulevard.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Grand Avenue. This is Grand Avenue.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Maspeth. This is Maspeth. Transfer is available to the G train.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is 21st Street, Queensbridge. This is 21st Street, Queensbridge. Transfer is available to the F train. This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is Roosevelt Island. This is Roosevelt Island. Transfer is available to the F train. Connection is available to the Roosevelt Island Tramway.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Manhattan-bound H train. The next stop is 55th Street. This is 55th Street. Transfer is available to the 6, E, M, and T trains.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is 42nd Street. This is 42nd Street United Nations. Transfer is available to the 4, 5, 6, and 7 trains. Transfer is also available to the shuttle to Times Square. Connection is available to Grand Central Terminal, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is 34th Street. This is 34th Street. Connection is available to the M34 Select bus service.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is 23rd Street. This is 23rd Street. Connection is available to the M23 Select bus service.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is 14th Street. This is 14th Street. Transfer is available to the L train.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is Houston Street. This is Houston Street. Transfer is available to the F train.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square-bound H train. The next stop is Grand Street. This is Grand Street. Transfer is available to the B and D trains.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square bound H train. The next stop is Chatham Square. This is Chatham Square.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square bound H train. The next stop is Seaport. This is Seaport.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the center of the platform.
This is a Hanover Square bound H train. The next and last stop is Hanover Square. This is Hanover Square.
This is an accessible station. An elevator is available at the front of the platform.
This is the last stop on this train. Thank you for riding New York City Transit.